Seasons, they come and they go. The leaves change, snow falls, snow melts, the flowers come up, and then it gets hot. But just as fast as these seasons change, so do the seasonal anime drops. The coming of fall or winter or spring or summer means more than just a changing in temperature. It means the bringing of new anime. And as I'm recording this video right now, the spring 2023 season is coming to a close. And as we wave goodbye to the likes of Vinland Saga and Dr. Stone and Demon Slayer, we say hello to the likes of brand new, fresh, and enticing anime. And this summer 2023 season is going to be one of the better seasons I can remember. With brand new anime like Zom 100 and Horimiya Peace being released, anime classics being brought back after 10 years away like Rurouni Kenshin, and part 2s to some of the most publicly beloved animes on Earth. That being, of course, Thousand Year Blood War Arc Part 2, and even bigger than that, JJK Season 2. Now, for those of you who are anime only, you know with Season 2, we're heading back in time to 2006, to when Gojo and Geto were not only still friends, but also still in high school together. And while that idea might sound like it's fun and lighthearted and super easy to digest, it's not. See, Season 2 of JJK is basically where JJK starts. The first 60-ish chapters are incredible, they're lighthearted, you get introduced to all the key players. But this section of the manga, and therefore the anime, is where the college-level lore explanations begin to get sewn into the fabric to create the incredibly diverse and complicated story that is Jujutsu Kaisen. And therefore, if you go into this season half-cocked, you're gonna find yourself not only confused, but also probably lost. Because if I'm being real, there's times that I'm reading JJK and I go, I have no idea what we're talking about anymore. So the purpose of today's video is to get you as prepared for JJK Season 2 as possible. So you can go in with a basic understanding of what's trying to be accomplished in the season, how it fundamentally works, and what makes all of the characters in this season tick. Therefore, by understanding the powers and motivations of all of the characters involved in this incredibly lore-heavy season, you'll be able to sit back, relax, and just enjoy the fights. Or just enjoy Gojo and Geto being young gays, exploring each other's bodies. That doesn't happen, but I mean, they do go on a beach vacation together. So guys, sit back, relax, and get your notepads out, because today we're talking everything you need to know before Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. Before we get to talking anything that you need to know, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you like knowing everything you need to know about anime, then you're gonna love my anime podcast, Who Talks Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you guys watch the podcast, tell me in the comments below what your favorite moment from the podcast has been thus far. So, JJK Season 2, is it a shameless plug to give us more Gojo and Geto content? I mean, sort of. JJK is about the only anime I've ever known to get about 60 chapters into its run and decide,
you know what, let's go 12 years into the past here.
And tell the story of two side characters becoming the men that they are today. And while that is obviously incredible, and it does act as a huge amount of fan service for everybody who loves Gojo and Geto, the real reason Akutami decided to go back into this preview is because there is so much lore that builds the universe out from this singularity point. Basically, what we're gonna go over in Season 2 is the reason that everything that's happening in modern day JJK is happening. And without the events that take place in this essentially prequel, nothing in JJK would have happened. But it is also still awesome to get more Gojo and Geto, that's undeniable. But Gojo and Geto aren't the only people involved in this season. In fact, in this season, you're gonna be introduced to a lot of characters that you may already know, but in their younger forms, and a couple of characters you definitely don't know. The biggest and most important out of all of those characters being Riko Amanai. See, Riko Amanai is what's known as a star plasma vessel, and is therefore incredibly important to the JJK universe. However, what is a star plasma vessel? It sounds like a sci-fi spaceship, and quite honestly, it couldn't be further from that. Well, in order to explain what a star plasma vessel is, I'm gonna have to explain a little bit about a person known as Tengen. Well, person is kind of a stretch. Tengen is more an entity than a person. See, Tengen is an entity that's existed since the Nara period, which in Japan is from the years 710 to 794. So Tengen is over 1,000 years old. And Tengen as an entity was responsible for building Japan's Jujutsu society into what it is today. It essentially created the foundations of Jujutsu sorcery in Japan. Now, the reason that Tengen is still alive 1,000 years later is because Tengen has an innate technique, just like how most Jujutsu sorcerers have an innate technique. However, Tengen's innate technique is immortality, meaning Tengen, so long as he isn't killed, will never die. However, Tengen's immortality isn't your standard immortality, like in Elf's immortality, where they stay young forever. See, while Tengen might be immortal, that does not stop it from aging, which is pretty much the worst type of immortality you can have. I mean, imagine you were immortal, but the second you hit 90, you were stuck in a basically decrepit, old, withering away body. I mean, sure, you can live to 10,000, but you won't move for the last 9,900 years. And because he ages, he requires something known as a star plasma vessel. See, Tengen doesn't necessarily turn into an old man or woman that's unable to walk. The problem with Tengen aging is that if he ages for too long, at one point his body will try and do something called evolve. Because remember, Tengen basically isn't a human. He's more or less just an entity created out of cursed energy. So it's not about its bones getting crickety, it's about its body deciding that it no longer needs to hold on to this corporeal form. But evolving is kind of a weird word for what Tengen's body would undergo if it were to evolve, as evolution for Tengen happens every 500 or so years, and if he is to evolve, that is to say, in those 500 years he isn't to merge with a star plasma vessel, then it will essentially become brain dead. Slowly but surely, Tengen will lose all semblance of self. It will simply become a blob of cursed energy that can be pushed in any direction. And while Tengen has always been highly neutral, never choosing a side in a conflict, it has always been anti-cursed spirit. And therefore, if Tengen were to evolve and basically lose its will, Tengen could be used by either side, being the Jujutsu sorcerers or the cursed spirits, which the Jujutsu sorcerers don't want, because Tengen is highly instrumental in making sure Japan stays safe. But before we talk about what Tengen is and why it's important to Japan's safety, we should now loop back to star plasma vessels. See, now that we understand that star plasma vessels are sacrifices essentially to Tengen, let's go over a couple of the things you need to be a star plasma vessel. The list isn't really all that long. You just need to be a young woman who's compatible with merging with Tengen. And in the era that we're stepping back to, 2006, there's only two possible candidates to be star plasma vessel. And that would be Riko, who's just an average high school student, and Yuki, who is one of the only special grade sorcerers on Earth outside of Gojo, Geto, and then eventually Yuta, but Yuta's not even really fighting anybody yet. I don't even know if Yuta's alive at this point. He probably is. He's like 4, I think. But that's it. Riko and Yuki are the only people on Earth currently who are compatible enough to merge with Tengen in order to refresh his immortality, aka to stop him from evolving. And like we've already stated, this is a process that needs to be repeated every 500 years. Now, the reason that Riko is being selected as the star plasma vessel here is because Yuki, even though she's considered a special grade sorcerer by Jujutsu High, has no connection to Jujutsu High. She goes out and does her own thing. On top of that, if you don't have to sacrifice one of the 3 existing special grade sorcerers, you're not going to. Now that we understand what star plasma vessels are, why is Tengen so important that we're sacrificing young women to it? I mean, sure, every 500 years is a pretty slow cadence to need women sacrifice you to increase your immortality so you don't evolve, but why is the idea of him evolving so detrimental to the Jujutsu Sorcery Society? Why can't we lose Tengen? Well, like we've already said, it's an entity that's existed since the 700s and obviously laid the foundations for Jujutsu Society. But more than that, and I mean much more than that, Tengen is a master of barrier technique. You know, the barriers that Jujutsu sorcerers will create in order to make sure that people around certain areas being affected by cursed spirits either aren't affected by those cursed spirits or just don't see what's going on? Well, that current technique can be applied in all different kinds of ways, like that barrier that Juzo Kumiya made in order to only keep Gojo out. Barrier techniques can be used in basically any way imaginable, and Tengen is absolutely by far and away the greatest barrier Jujutsu sorcerer on Earth, and is actually instrumental in maintaining multiple key barriers around Japan. The most important of which, at least the JJK High, being the barrier around JJK High. You know, like the barrier that Mahito had to weave his way through in order to find the cursed wombed paintings. Without Tengen maintaining these barriers, not only would places like JJK High be incredibly susceptible to attack, and all the cursed tools and weapons and items they have susceptible to plunder, but multiple other very important protected areas would also be susceptible to attack and plunder. Therefore, even though Tengen is technically a neutral force, its maintenance of key barriers around Japan keep Jujutsu sorcerers and humans alike safe from cursed spirits. However, if Tengen were to evolve and lose its will, not only would its control on barrier technique begin to slip, but also its barrier technique ability could be stolen by cursed spirits. And this isn't the only thing that JJK High is afraid of. See, nobody knows what happens when Tengen evolves. He could go brain dead, or he could become an enemy, turning the very barriers that it controls against Jujutsu Society. And even worse than that, the only people who can merge with Tengen before he evolves are star plasma vessels. However, after it evolves, there's a possibility that other people, like cursed spirits, could merge with it and steal its powers. Meaning there's a possibility that people like Sukuna could merge with Tengen and gain his barrier technique, which would be incredibly dangerous for Jujutsu Society. And thus, Jujutsu Society has an incredibly vested interest in making sure Tengen never evolves. And thus, JJK High sends 2 special grade sorcerers to make sure that the star plasma vessel gets from where she is to Tengen. And those 2 special grade sorcerers are Gojo and Geto. Gojo and Geto had become special grade sorcerers while they were still in JJK High. Gojo got his grade from being a wielder of the 6 Eyes and the Limitless, and Geto got his by being one of the most powerful Shikigami users known to man. And thus, JJK High was really sending its A-team to make sure that Riku makes it to Tengen. But why is JJK High so worried about Riku making it to Tengen? Well, because even though JJK High wants Riku to merge with Tengen and refresh his immortality, not everybody wants that. In fact, there's an incredibly loud, rich, and dangerous subsection of people that don't want that. There's an association known as the Time Vessel Association, who worship the idea of an immortal Tengen. Tengen is their god, and they believe that Tengen merging with a star plasma vessel is impure and would sully this immortal god's name. And thus, the Time Vessel Association has an incredibly vested interest in making sure that Tengen does not merge with a star plasma vessel, which is why JJK High needs to send out their best and their brightest to make sure that the Time Vessel Association doesn't get their hands on Riku. However, the Time Vessel Association also gets their best and their brightest. So the Time Vessel Association hires a man by the name of Toji Fushiguro. And if that name sounds familiar to you, good, it should. He's Megami's father. However, he's nothing like Megami. See, while Megami is obviously an incredibly talented user of the 10 Shadows, Toji doesn't have cursed energy, like at all. In fact, he's a wielder of something known as Heavenly Restriction, which is the ability to shut yourself off from all cursed energy. And for those of you who have been paying attention, you'll know that everything in the JJK universe has cursed energy. In fact, the reason that cursed spirits were made in the first place is because humans emit cursed energy, and therefore, when all of that cursed energy comes together, it creates a cursed spirit. And those cursed spirits are representative of what people are projecting this cursed energy at, which is why things like the smallpox cursed spirit or the tsunami cursed spirit are so powerful. It's because there's so much animosity towards those ideas. But Toji has no cursed energy, and therefore technically doesn't contribute to the creation of more cursed spirits, which is a very important plot point that we'll talk on in a second. Now, Toji is known as the Sorcerer Killer. Now, the reason he's known as the Sorcerer Killer is because, well, he kills Jujutsu sorcerers. Like, even the highest level Jujutsu sorcerers. Like, he kills anybody he can get his hands on. And this is because, as a master of Heavenly Restriction, he's a bad matchup for most sorcerers. See, outside of having absolutely no cursed energy whatsoever, Toji is also superhumanly fast and strong. Even though a lot of Jujutsu sorcerers are able to use cursed energy to boost their own physical stats, Toji is, without cursed energy, still a step above. Not to mention, as somebody without cursed energy, Jujutsu sorcerers can't track his cursed energy. And because this, Jujutsu sorcerers are incredibly ill-matched against him, because a lot of them rely on the ability to track somebody's cursed energy to make sure where they are in combat. However, when they're battling against Toji, they don't have that ability, so all they have to rely on is their eyes. So before you know it, you're getting boxed by a man too fast for your eyes to keep up with, who you can't track. Tie that into the fact that Toji also carries a myriad of incredibly powerful cursed tools with him anywhere he goes, and before you know it, while you're battling against Toji, you have a sword through your heart. And considering the fact that Toji has weapons like the inverted Spear of Heaven, which is one of the most powerful cursed tools ever made, he's able to punch through any cursed techniques you throw at him, as the inverted Spear of Heaven is able to destroy any cursed technique it touches. Therefore, things like Gojo's Infinity that stop anybody from hitting him by slowing down the approaching object to an infinitesimal speed are essentially null and void, because the inverted Spear of Heaven just punches through infinity. And therefore, Toji could very easily be considered a special grade sorcerer, even even though he's technically not a sorcerer at all. Toji is simply a human who can go toe-to-toe with any cursed spirit or jujutsu sorcerer at any level. And Toji isn't the only person to ever use Heavenly Restriction. In fact, in the manga now, Maki is a wielder of it. Now, Toji being the big bad guy of this arc is bad. Because while we might say, oh,
Well, Gojo's gonna be there, everything's gonna be fine.
the version of Gojo and Geto that we get in this story are substantially weaker than we see them in the likes of Chapter 0. See, while Gojo in this prequel technically is still a wielder of the Six Eyes and the Limitless, he is not nearly as well versed in these techniques as he is now in the modern day. See, we know in the modern day that Gojo is able to use his Six Eyes and his Limitless constantly, as Gojo has figured out how to use reverse curse technique to stop his brain from being exhausted, as well as use the Six Eyes to make sure that any curse technique he uses basically uses no cursed energy whatsoever, giving Gojo an infinite pool of cursed energy. However, when he was still in high school, this was not the case. While Gojo was a proficient user of the Six Eyes and the Limitless and does have an insane amount of cursed energy, limitless use of the Limitless and the Six Eyes simultaneously was not an option for him. Now, this is mostly to do with the fact that at this current moment, Gojo has not mastered reverse curse technique, which for those of you who don't know is reversing cursed energy to make it into positive energy, which heals, which is widely considered probably the hardest thing you can do with cursed energy. And thus Gojo is only able to use his Six Eyes and his Limitless simultaneously for a couple of days at most. And while that doesn't sound so bad, the trip of getting Riko Amanai to Tengen takes a couple of days. And thus, while Gojo in the current manga may seem infallible, this impossible creature to defeat that every bad guy has to plan around, and the same could be said for Geto. See, Geto in this part of the story is also very powerful, arguably the strongest Shikigami user known to man. But a big part of Geto's strength is acquiring as many Shikigami as possible, so he can use things like his ultimate Uzumaki, or just have a wider arsenal of Shikigami to work with. So just mire your expectations for them being these absolutely unstoppable forces, especially when they're working together. There is clear and present danger. Outside of the transport of Tengen, this season also gives us a really good look into Geto's grappling with his ideology. It's in this part of the manga that season 2 is going to be covering that we begin to see Geto start to grasp the idea that there's a possibility that he could rid Japan of cursed energy. In fact, that idea is seeded in his brain by Yuki, the other special grade sorcerer. Now, the reason that I said Toji using Heavenly Restriction is important is because this is one of the ways that Geto and Yuki believe there is a possibility that they could rid Japan of cursed energy, as Toji demonstrates that humans have the ability to cut off their cursed energy, and if no humans create cursed energy anymore, there won't be any more cursed spirits, and humanity will be saved. Though outside of Heavenly Restriction, Jujutsu sorcerers also don't leak cursed energy. And therefore, if the entire world were Jujutsu sorcerers, there would also no longer be cursed spirits. Now, if you've seen Chapter 0, you'll know that this is the approach that Geto decides to use. His idea is to rid the world of non-sorcerers, or awake as many humans as possible to Jujutsu sorcery. And once everybody in Japan has the ability to use Jujutsu sorcery, there will no longer be cursed energy made, and cursed spirits will disappear. Now, does he technically get a little racist about it? Yeah, but the general idea is to save humanity. And in this arc, you'll begin to see him grapple with these ideas on how he can save the world from cursed energy. And so long as season 2 does stay in Gojo's past, that's pretty much everything you need to know. But listen, don't be afraid to ask questions. JJK does get complicated, and after this arc, it will only get more complicated. I'll be making deeper dive videos into basically all of the concepts of JJK while it's releasing for the next 3 months. So if you have any questions that need addressing, just either leave them in the comments or email me. And if enough people start asking questions about the same thing, well, then I'll make a video about it and explain it. Because JJK probably has the only power system in universe that rivals Hunter x Hunter in complexity. So don't let anybody make you feel stupid for not understanding it. But now, hopefully, you're gonna understand season 2 a little bit better, which will allow you to enjoy the masterpiece that this season is going to be. Are you guys excited for this new season? What are you looking forward to most out of Gojo's past arc? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. It's always tough seeing Gojo and Geto so young and together and happy. I just want that for them again.